I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. We're less than 7 months away from the USMNT's opening World Cup match, and after these last three fall windows, it seems we have a lot more data on what kind of roster Pochettino wants to put together. So I thought today's show would be a good time to take everything we know as of now and try to predict what the final 26-man World Cup roster will look like. And to help me do that, I've invited Larry Henry Jr. to join this show. Larry is the managing editor for SBI Soccer. Larry, welcome to the show as always.
Hey, Frank. Good to be back with you as always. I'm glad to break down the current picture of the U.S. men's national team as we have no more matches to look forward to in 2025, but we definitely have a lot to look forward to in 2026. So excited to be back with you as always.
Yeah. And so what I did for this exercise is Larry and I independently, put together our 26-man rosters. We did not talk whatsoever. And then I kind of uploaded them into a spreadsheet, and we're going to kind of walk through that. And I'm going to tell you, Larry, I thought there would be, 5, 6, 7 differences, and we'd have some like really hardcore debates here. But there were actually only 2 players in the whole 26-man roster that we differed on. So I'm gonna save that till we get to the positions to let everyone know what those are. But we'll go through the positions position by position, and let's start with goalkeeper. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see my screen here. For everybody else, I'll be talking you through our spreadsheet here. So, Larry, you want to go first on the goalkeepers, and just walk me through who you picked and what kind of challenges you had as you were trying to put these goalkeepers together.
Yeah, so goalkeepers, I think that was one of the easier positions to pick, right? Obviously only 3 players. And number 1, I think you have to go with Matt Freese. Pretty self-explanatory with the appearances he's had this year. He was able to make 13 appearances for the national team. Had a ton of success through the CONCACAF Gold Cup, and really showed some calmness, some composure throughout the tournament, and also over the last 3 fall windows. So I think right now it's really his job to lose unless there is an injury that pops up. Hopefully not. I don't see him dropping out of that number 1 spot anytime soon. Really, the number 2 and 3 spots were, I guess, a little tougher to call just because, again, things can change by the time we get to the March window and by the time we even get to June. Matt Turner, I would say right now would be the number 2, just given his experience with the national team with Pochettino and even before when Pochettino took the position. He's a veteran goalie. He's played obviously at the World Cup in 2022. So, he's not shy from big moments. I think he's important to have because, again, just that veteran experience. He's older than Matt Freese, so maybe a little bit of leadership qualities there. And then the number 3 spot, I went with Patrick Schulte. He made 1 appearance for the national team this year. I think still has, a good ceiling to get to as a player. Obviously, he's really kind of come into his own with Columbus Crew, working through MLS Next Pro and then becoming a consistent starter in MLS. But obviously things can change for that number 3 spot. With him being in MLS, he's going to have a long break now before he's back in action. With Columbus's season being over. So we could possibly see one of those other options sneak in. Zach Steffen's a veteran goalie. I know he missed some time this season. Chris Brady has continued to be a starter for the Chicago Fire. Roman Celentano recently just had his season end with FC Cincinnati, so he's going into the offseason. Jonathan Klinsmann is maybe a possible inclusion, just because the fact he'll still be playing throughout the winter with Cesena in Serie B, in Italy. So he could possibly be in the mix next year. And then Diego Koken, who is a dual national and hasn't really had tons of experience with the national team, but is one for the future. So, but I think right now, looking at those three, I think those are the three guys just based off their performances with the national teams this year, and obviously I think it's Freeze's job to lose heading into 2026.
Yeah, and so I picked the exact same three goalkeepers. The only one I struggled with a little bit was Patrick Schulte, just because I don't know. He hasn't done much with the national team. I mean, there's really nobody who's done much to kind of like cement their spot, in this number three. So you got to think that there's a lot of wiggle room on who that might be. But I look at if we're saying Matt Freese is the starting goalkeeper, Matt Turner, the other two guys that we're saying here, they have kind of big international match experience. Matt Turner playing and starting at the previous World Cup, and Patrick Schulte was the goalkeeper at the Olympics. And so I think that gives him a big edge over some of these other guys, is that you can put him in there in a big international match, and it won't be new for them. I still think Zach Steffen, I don't know. It might be too much optimism at this point, but I still think he has a chance. But you got to think these MLS guys, their season's not going to be starting until mid-February, and the next international break is going to be in March, so they're not going to have a lot of time to kind of get ramped up and really impress Pochettino and get called in because their performance has been so unbelievable. And if you don't get called in by March, I mean, I don't know, it's going to be hard pressed to make it into, basically then you're just hoping to make the final roster, right? Because that's the next time, the team's going to get put together. So this could change here, but I do ultimately think that these three goalkeepers we went with is a pretty safe bet. But anything can change. Okay, let's go to defenders next. And let me just pull that up on the screen here. There we go. And I'll go first on this one, Larry. You can see we had one disagreement. We had one disagreement on defenders. And it was my kind of last guy I was trying to think to put in here. But the defenders I went with, so 9 defenders. I ended up going with 4 center backs: Chris Richards, Tim Ream, Miles Robinson, Mark McKenzie, and then 5 outside backs: Anthony Robinson, Serginho Dest, Max Arfston, Alex Freeman, and Joe Scally. The only difference was that instead of Joe Scally, you plugged in Austin Trusty. And I fully admit I had a really hard time with this. I ended up going with Joe Scally on my end because I just think of the versatility that he gives, being able to play either left or right outside back, or able to play as kind of like a third center back. And I just feel like that kind of versatility when you're filling out the bottom end of this roster or those last few roster spots can be something useful. But it won't surprise me at all if I was wrong and he brought in, Austin Trusty, like you said. I mean, why did you end up going with Austin Trusty? And was he kind of like your last man in? And why did you end up going with him?
Yeah, I think it definitely was the last man in sort of situation. While I do think Joe Scally's had a really good season so far with Gladbach in the Bundesliga, and he started to kind of pick up his production over the last few weeks as they've kind of turned their season around a little bit. I just think Austin Trusty is one of those situations where yes, Scally can play those outside positions, and even when I was at the Paraguay match about a week ago, he played like that right-sided, center back in the back three, which he doesn't look out of sorts. I just think Trusty maybe brings a little more, and he is a natural, center back, whereas Scally isn't. Trusty has also been shifted into kind of an outside, fullback at times for Celtic back when, Cameron Carter-Vickers was healthy and those two were on the field together. I know that's how Brendan Rodgers at least would line it up at times, and, what he does, and Pochettino is very different. But yeah, I just think Trusty again brings a little bit more help at center back. Obviously, we both had 4 center backs in the picture. And I think too that you're starting to see the versatility out of some of the other fullbacks. Serginho Dest can play both sides if needed. Alex Freeman, we mainly see him, on the right side of things, but, he seems very versatile as well. Max Arfston too. But yeah, it's really a toss up and between, I think, those two guys, Scally and Trusty. It's one of those, I guess, like you said, it's a last man in situation. Who's going to be healthy at that time of year? Who's going to be in really good form? Obviously, Trusty's kind of tossed into a larger role now at Celtic with Cameron Carter-Vickers pretty much out for the season. So he might be playing more minutes than he was thinking he would be playing a couple weeks ago. So I'm really intrigued to see how it all plays out. And then obviously the guys, in our other options kind of list. I mean, it's tough to see any of these guys sneaking in. Maybe John Tolkien. I know he had a decent showing in the November camp. He brings some versatility as well. Noah Kai Banks could be kind of a wild card in terms of, he's playing pretty regularly now at Augsburg in the Bundesliga, and he's a young player. Sometimes coaches like to have those young options off the bench. But pretty much everybody else in that list, I think they're on the outside looking in and really need some things to happen to be in that final roster.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, maybe the one other guy I'll call out on that other options list, and just to read these off, the other options list to folks who aren't seeing this, John Tolkien, Cameron Carter-Vickers, who of course is out, due to injury for the rest of the European season. So we can, I think, pretty safely say he's out of the World Cup picture as well. Tristan Blackman, Walker Zimmerman, George Campbell, Noah Kai Banks, Caleb Wiley, Christopher Lund, Marlon Fossey, Nathan Harriel. The only other guy I think maybe has a decent chance is Tristan Blackman. I only say that because I don't really know how Poch rates him, because he brought him into, was it the September or the October window? One of those windows, and he got 2 starts, but then he got injured afterwards, and so he couldn't be brought in. Was he impressive enough that Poch would have brought him in, and it was only because of the injuries, or would he not have been? And so we won't really know that until March. But if, for example, Poch was really impressed with him and he starts the MLS season great in March, we know Poch isn't afraid to bring in MLS players. This guy was the MLS Defender of the Year, if I'm not mistaken, and so I see him as a possibility as well. But yeah, I think this where we have Joe Scally, that's kind of like the line in the sand right there, where I feel pretty comfortable with the guys above him. But then he's kind of in a real precarious position, right there. Okay, let's go to midfielders next. And, we agreed perfectly on this one, Larry. Some of these midfielders sometimes get put in the forward position. Some of the forwards sometimes get put in the midfield position. Just so you know, you had Diego Luna as a midfielder. I had him as a forward, so I just moved him down to that list. That's why you don't see him there. But the midfielders that we have here is 7 of them: Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Malik Tillman, Christian Roldan, Tanner Tessman, Sebastian Berhalter, Gio Reyna. Where were your struggles in putting this list together? Where were your doubts?
Yeah, it was definitely tough. This was probably the toughest position I had in terms of just piecing together, maybe the guys on the outside. I think Tyler Adams is a sure, bet. Just his experience with the national team, his impact. I think Weston McKennie too. I know people are a little worried that, he didn't feature in the November camp, but I think when things, come around in 2026, you're going to see him in March and then in June, pending that he's healthy. Malik Tillman as well. I know he's kind of had a slow start with Bayer Leverkusen over the last few months. But he, had a great performance over the weekend with a goal and an assist. Christian Roldan is an intriguing one. I know it's not the glitz glamour pick that a lot of people really want in midfield, but he's a veteran midfielder. He brings a lot of good things to the table. I know the Paraguay match I was at, he worked tremendously hard, pretty much helped set up that second goal, which was the winner, even though he wasn't in the score sheet with an assist. He really, turned that play into a counter. Tanner Tessman's done a really good job. It was great to see him get a goal, his first goal over the November window. It's really the last two for me with Sebastian Berhalter and Gio Reyna. I thought Sebastian Berhalter did extremely well in his opportunities this year. He had 9 caps with the national team, which is the tied for the 4th most among the midfield group. Only Diego Luna, Jack McGlynn, and Tyler Adams had more. His quality on set pieces and corners was really, inspiring to see. I know he's done that with Vancouver for a lot of this season, but just his delivery at times, I think I even saw some, kind of some jokes on Twitter about, hopefully we don't see Christian Pulisic on set piece duty again, because Sebastian Berhalter can deliver some really good free kicks, some really good service, and I expect him to, be part of this roster and, maybe be taking those opportunities a lot more. Gio Reyna is another one where I know in the last section we talked about last man in. I think he's also right now in that category, just because I know he hasn't played a whole bunch for Gladbach, but this window was a really needed window for him in terms of getting that goal against Paraguay, helping set up the winner against them. Had a really good assist on that. I believe it was the Tessman goal against Uruguay. So that was awesome to see. And everything that we've, heard from Gio Reyna, teammates have said about Gio Reyna in this window, he just wants to play. He wants to put the pass behind him and play. And I think that, that shows a little bit of growth for him, that he wants to just, get back to doing what he does, and that's playing, at a high level and being impactful. So I think if the, World Cup started today, I think he'd be on that roster. The two guys, I guess, on the other options list that I know you'll break down was Aiden Morris being one of them, just because I think he did pretty well over the November window in his opportunities. He, again, not a glitz glamour pick, but works extremely hard in the midfield. And then the other guy I thought maybe could sneak into the picture in the new year would be Yunus Musa, but just because of his quality as a midfielder. But unfortunately, the minutes aren't coming for him right now in Serie A, and I think that's ultimately holding him back from being part of the last couple windows and just getting back to being a key part of this team. And obviously things can change, but right now it doesn't. That loan move for him doesn't look very good.
Yeah, I think he just came off of another weekend with Atalanta of not getting even a minute. Right. So, yep. I mean, I don't know how many games in a row that is for him. Something like four or 5 matches in a row where he hasn't even seen the field. I mean, yeah, that's not looking good. But he's a player that Pochettino already knows. You know what I mean? So he's had a chance to spend time with him in camp. And so if something does change in the coming year and he does start getting a lot of minutes, he's one of the guys that I think could make it back into the team more easily, than some of these other guys that maybe Poch doesn't know as well. Yeah, I mean, we're leaving off a lot of guys here. I mean, Jack McGlynn, Aiden Morris, Timothy Tillman, Yunus Musa, Johnny Cardoso, James Sands. I also have Luca De La Torre and Gianluca Busio on there. I think they're pretty far out of the picture right now. But those other guys I named, I mean, those are some good players. And I think that my kind of last two in the midfield section that I struggled with were Sebastian Berhalter and Gio Reyna. I think that between Sebastian Berhalter and Jack McGlynn, one of those two will make it in because they're both just so excellent at set pieces. But I don't know if you can afford to bring both of them in there. Jack McGlynn, of course, has been hurt. We'll see what he does when he comes back. But all indications are that Poch is a big fan of McGlynn as well and wanted to bring him into, I think it was the October camp right before he ended up getting hurt. And then Gio Reyna, I'm still not totally bought in with, kind of like you said. I think he's going to have to get going at Gladbach. He hasn't so far. I mean, he had his weekend, I think he played 20 minutes, so he got like garbage time. Again, I think Gladbach were already up 2-0 or 3-0, something like that. And so, but on the other hand, Poch saw what he could do, when he came in with limited minutes and how good he performed. And so I think ultimately at the end of the day, he's going to find a way to get himself in there. But we'll see. And I think he's kind of in competition with not only some of these guys that we talked about as other options, but some of the forwards we'll be talking about down below. Okay, let's get to those forwards then. Our last section here. And 7 forwards here. And you can see we disagreed on one player here as well. So this was our second disagreement. But the 7 forwards I brought in: Christian Pulisic, Timothy Weah, Fuller Balogun, Ricardo Pepi, Haji Wright, Diego Luna. And I brought in Brendan Aronson. Instead of Brendan Aronson, you brought in Alex Zendejas. And we left off guys like Patrick Agyemang, Josh Sargent. I really think those are the only 2, right now. Even though we have Brian White and Damian Downs listed up there as well, I don't really see them that close to the picture. And so let's break down this Brendan Aronson, Alex Zendejas one. I mean, I kind of went with Brendan Aronson, similar to why I brought in Joe Scally, like his versatility. When I think of like a squad player, like when we're thinking about these last few players to bring into the roster, I think of all the different positions Brendan Aronson can play. I also think of him as a guy who can do a very specific role. He's probably the best presser on the team. Maybe has one of the best work engines, on the team. And so if you have a situation or you have a match where you really need somebody up front pressing hard and just being kind of like a gnat around the ball, I think he could fill that role. But I did think about Zendejas quite a bit as well. Why'd you end up going with him?
Yeah, it was definitely a tough selection. I love Brendan Aronson as a player. I have a soft spot for him just being from New Jersey and him, growing up 20 minutes from where I did. It was always cool to see him get into the picture and become a key player. Obviously, I do agree with you on the fact that he does deliver a good shift in terms of his work rate, his defensive pressing. I think for me at least, what it comes down to is the fact that if you need a guy to come off the bench that can maybe, in a World Cup, it needs to get a goal, needs to kind of chip in, can make things happen in the final third. I think we've definitely seen more of that from Alex Zendejas over the past, 12, 16 months than we'd have with Brendan Aronson. I know 2 very different clubs and leagues and situations. Obviously, Zendejas's club production, kind of blows Aronson out of the water over the past few years. But 2 very different players, like you said. I mean, 2 with Aronson can drop in the midfield as well. Zendejas, we mainly see him more as a winger with Club America. And obviously, I know he had been, missing some time this fall through injury. But I thought he did extremely well in the opportunity that he had. I believe it was the September camp when he scored that goal in September window. And then we didn't really see him again because I think it was then his injury popped up. But he definitely got a lot of praise. I know that window from some of the, TNT, HBO pundits, that window. And I just think that, in a World Cup game, a do or die game, you have to go to the bench. Who are you going to bring in? While Brendan Aronson does bring a lot of energy, a lot of good work off the ball, I think Zendejas gives you more in terms of possession and on the ball abilities. And that's why I went with him over Aronson. But it does seem that Pochettino really likes having Aronson in the team. He made 9 appearances for the national team this year, and again brings a little bit kind of different type of work rate than Zendejas.
Yeah, and we talked about kind of this crossover between some of the players listed as midfielders and some as forwards. I mean, I really think Gio Reyna, Brendan Aronson, Alex Zendejas, those three could almost be in a bucket together, and it's likely that only two of those three, two of them, make it in. And so it's going to be close. I mean, what I think this exercise helped me realize was that how many players, like where that line in the sand really is, who those bubble players are, and which ones could just make it in and which ones could just be left out. And it kind of highlights some of these tough decisions that Poch is going to have to make. Last thing I want to ask you, like when we're talking about like NCAA March Madness, and they're talking about the teams that are going to make it into the tournament, they're always talking about like last four in, first four out type of thing. So let's do last three in, first three out on this roster. Who are the last three players you bring into your roster? Who are the first three out? For me, I would say last three in were Joe Scally, Brendan Aronson, and I'd say Sebastian Berhalter. Only because I think that Sebastian Berhalter, Jack McGlynn decision, if I'm right on that, is really close to a toss-up, at this point, even though Berhalter had an amazing window. So my last three in, Scally, Berhalter, Aronson. Last three out would be McGlynn, Zendejas, and probably one of the center backs. I'll give you Austin Trusty. Yeah. McGlynn, Austin Trusty, and Zendejas would be my last three out. Who's your last three in, first three out?
Yeah, I'm probably the opposite. My last three in would be Austin Trusty, Alex Zendejas, and Gio Reyna, and then my first three out would be this is tough. Probably it would be Joe Scally, Brendan Aronson, and I would even toss in like an Aiden Morris, or just because I think the thing that had me with McGlynn and Morris is with McGlynn, obviously I know he had a kind of a serious injury near the end of the season with Houston Dynamo. I think it was an ACL, and I think he also foot injury.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know what his status is in terms of being ready for the new year. I imagine he'll be ready for MLS preseason, which, for these teams nowadays, like January, or mid-January, especially because there's no January camp for the national team anymore. But yeah, I think those would be the three guys. I think Morris has done a good job. Even I know I've updated this roster projection post that I've had over at SBI a bunch of times. Ajiman was a guy originally I thought could sneak into the picture as well, just because of his physicality and his work rate, and might not come in through with the goals all the time, but does a lot of great things. We're seeing that at Derby County. He's doing a lot hold up play and winning duels and drawing fouls. I know he had a really good Gold Cup. But yeah, I think my first three out would be Scally, Aiden Morris, and Brendan Aronson.
That's a good call on Ajiman. I mean, he's right there, and if Pepe doesn't get rolling at PSV like we expect him to, or if Haji Wright drops off at all at Coventry City, you could see Ajiman, because Derby County's playing pretty well, and he is playing pretty well for them. If he starts getting a string of goals, I could easily see him back in the picture, because Poch obviously likes him as well.
I think too, the big thing I guess would be that I guess you would say the number 4 striker, and it's really between I think him and Sargent. Sargent has really cooled off in terms of his production. He started off guns blazing, him and Haji Wright. It was like every week who's going to finish the weekend top of the Golden Boot charts in the championship. And I mean Norwich City, it really people I've talked to, reporters I've talked to over there, it's really Josh Sargent. If Josh Sargent's not scoring the goals, Norwich City aren't going to get results, and we're seeing that right now with them being in the relegation picture. They've already fired Liam Manning and switch coaches. And who knows? I mean, Josh Sargent's club situation could look a lot different in January if Norwich are still in the bottom three or in the bottom 4 or 5. He could be, potentially on the move, which could help his chances. But I think Ajiman right now has the leg up on Josh Sargent in terms of that number 4 spot, and like you said, could even sneak into that number 3 spot if Pepe or Wright kind of drop off. I think out of the strikers, Balogun, I think right now is, I would say, 90% to me in terms of a lock for the strikers. Everyone else is kind of, we'll see. I don't think they're a lock just yet.
Yep, totally agree. All right, Larry. Well, I will make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at lhenry019, and also to your work at SBI Soccer. Thanks again for coming on the show and doing this exercise with me.
Yeah, no problem, Frank. It was great to break it all down with you. And now I know you have my apartment bugged with how many little differences we had in our roster. So.
That's true. I don't know if we just think so similar or if it's that obvious, but we'll see how our rosters change over these next couple months here. Thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.